The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline mountains of Kepler 442b as Dr. Sarachin stepped out of the research station's main building. The air was thin but breathable, thanks to the atmospheric processors that had been working for 3 years to make this remote outpost habitable. New Harmony, as the colonists had named it, was humanity's furthest research station, sitting on the edge of known space like a lonely lighthouse in an ocean of stars. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter against the cold morning air and walked toward the communication array. As the station's chief xenobiologist, she had discovered 17 new species in the past 6 months alone. The planet was a treasure trove of unique life forms, each more fascinating than the last. The bioluminescent fungi that grew in the cave systems could revolutionize medical technology, while the crystalline formations seemed to possess properties that defied current understanding of physics. The station housed 43 researchers, engineers, and support staff. They were scientists, not soldiers, drawn together by humanity's endless curiosity about the universe. Most had families back on Earth or the inner colonies, connected only by quantum communication bursts that took weeks to reach home. They were explorers in the truest sense, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge in a galaxy that seemed infinite and full of wonders. Commander James Rodriguez stood in the control room, reviewing the daily reports. A former military officer turned expedition leader, he had volunteered for this assignment because he believed in the mission. Humanity needed to expand, to learn, to grow beyond the confines of their home system. The universe was vast and largely empty, but places like New Harmony proved that life found a way to flourish in the most unlikely corners of space. The station's defenses were minimal by design. A few automated turrets for asteroid defense, basic shields to protect against cosmic radiation, and emergency protocols in case of equipment failure. No one expected trouble this far from civilized space. The galaxy was big enough for everyone, and humans had always approached first contact with open hands rather than clenched fists. That philosophy was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. The attack came without warning during the afternoon shift. Dr. Chen was in her laboratory, examining samples from the morning's expedition, when the first energy blast struck the eastern wing of the station. The building shook violently, and emergency lights began flashing red throughout the complex. She grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the central hub, her mind racing to understand what was happening. In the control room, Commander Rodriguez was trying to make sense of the sensor readings. 6 ships had appeared out of nowhere, their configuration unlike anything in human databases. They were sleek and predatory, moving with a fluid grace that spoke of advanced technology. The ships had opened fire without attempting communication, their weapons tearing through the station's basic shields like paper. The attackers were methodical in their assault. They targeted the communication array first, cutting off any chance of calling for help. Then, they systematically destroyed the defensive systems, leaving the station helpless against their superior firepower. It became clear that this was not random violence but a calculated attack designed to eliminate every trace of human presence on Kepler 442b. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief engineer, worked frantically at her console trying to restore power to the shields. Sparks flew from damaged circuits as she rerouted emergency power, but it was like trying to stop a flood with a paper cup. The alien weapons were too advanced, their energy output overwhelming the station's defenses designed for mining accidents and equipment failures, not military engagement. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the alien ships moving in perfect formation. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, their hulls reflecting the planet's amber sunlight like liquid metal. But there was something cold and merciless in their movements, a precision that spoke of species that had done this many times before. The aliens finally made contact through the emergency channels, their message transmitted in perfect English through some kind of translation technology. The voice was cold and mechanical, devoid of any emotion that humans might recognize. Human settlement designated for termination. Species classification, inferior. Evacuation not permitted. Extermination protocol initiated. Commander Rodriguez grabbed the communication device, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. This is Commander James Rodriguez of the New Harmony Research Station. We are peaceful scientists conducting legitimate research. We pose no threat to anyone. Please, we can discuss whatever concerns you might have. The response was immediate and chilling. Discussion irrelevant. Humans are contamination. This sector requires purification. Compliance is not requested. The aliens called themselves the hegemony, though their actual species name was unpronounceable by human tongues. They had been expanding across this region of space for over 1,000 years, systematically eliminating what they considered inferior species. Humans were simply the latest entry on their long list of civilizations to be erased from existence. The attack intensified as the alien ships moved closer to the station. Energy beams carved through the reinforced walls, and explosions echoed through the corridors as life support systems began failing. The research staff, trained for scientific emergencies but not warfare, did their best to help the wounded and maintain critical systems. Dr. Chen found herself in the medical bay, helping Dr. Marcus Webb treat the injured. Burns from energy weapons were unlike anything they had encountered before, the alien technology causing cellular damage that their medical equipment struggled to understand. People were dying, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. How long until the next supply ship arrives? Sarah asked, knowing the answer but desperate for any hope. 4 months, Dr. Webb replied grimly. Even if we could get a message out, help wouldn't arrive in time. The station's population was slowly being whittled down as sections were destroyed or became uninhabitable. Emergency bulkheads sealed off damaged areas, but it was only a matter of time before the entire facility was compromised. The aliens seemed to be taking their time, perhaps studying human defensive capabilities or simply enjoying the slow extermination of another species. In the communication center, Engineer Vasquez had managed to jury-rig a quantum burst transmitter from spare parts. It would only work once, and the signal would be weak, but it might be enough to get a message back to Earth. She worked feverishly as explosions shook the station, knowing that this might be humanity's only chance to learn what had happened to New Harmony. Commander Rodriguez made the decision that would change everything. Instead of sending a plea for help or evacuation, he chose to send a complete tactical analysis of the attack. Ship configurations, weapon signatures, attack patterns, and, most importantly, the location coordinates of the hegemony fleet. If New Harmony was going to fall, Earth would at least know what they were dealing with. The message was encoded with every piece of data they had gathered about their attackers. Rodriguez also included personal messages from the crew, final words to loved ones who might never know what had happened to them. But the bulk of the transmission was pure military intelligence, the kind of information that could make the difference between survival and extinction for the human species. As Vasquez initiated the quantum burst, the aliens detected the transmission attempt. Their response was swift and merciless. The remaining communication equipment was vaporized in a concentrated beam attack, but not before the message had been sent racing toward Earth at faster than light speeds. The final assault began as the alien ships positioned themselves around the station. They no longer seemed interested in studying human technology or tactics. The time for observation was over, and the time for extermination had come. Energy beams converged on the central hub, and the last defenders of New Harmony knew that their end was approaching. In those final moments, the survivors gathered in the central assembly area. They were scientists, engineers, doctors, and researchers who had come to this distant world in the name of knowledge and discovery. They had found wonders beyond imagination, life forms that could reshape humanity's understanding of biology, and geological formations that suggested new laws of physics. Now they faced extinction at the hands of creatures who saw them as nothing more than contamination to be cleansed. But they faced it together, maintaining their humanity even in the face of incomprehensible alien hatred. Some held hands, others shared final memories of home, and a few continued working at their stations until the very end. Dr. Chen spent her last moments thinking about the bioluminescent fungi she had discovered in the deep caves. They had evolved a form of communication through light patterns that might have revolutionized human understanding of consciousness itself. That research would die with her, along with countless other discoveries that could have benefited all of humanity. Commander Rodriguez stood at his post, watching the tactical display as the alien ships prepared for their final attack. He had served in the military for 20 years before taking this assignment, but he had never imagined facing an enemy like this. An enemy that offered no terms, no possibility of surrender, no recognition of human worth or dignity. The quantum message burst was already racing toward Earth, carrying the story of New Harmony's final hours and the tactical intelligence that might save humanity from sharing the same fate. Rodriguez hoped that someone back home would understand the significance of what they had learned, that his people's sacrifice would not be in vain. The alien ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined energy output turning the research station into a brief star in the amber sky of Kepler 442b. In seconds, 3 years of human presence on the planet was erased as if it had never existed. The hegemony ships lingered for a few hours, conducting detailed scans to ensure complete extermination, then departed for their next target. The message from New Harmony reached Earth 6 weeks later, transmitted through a network of quantum relay stations that spanned human space. The signal was weak and fragmented, but the essential information was intact. 43 researchers had died, and humanity now knew that they were not alone in the universe. They also knew that their neighbors were not friendly. Admiral Sarah Morrison stood in the war room deep beneath the United Earth Defense Headquarters, studying the tactical data from the doomed outpost. The information was comprehensive and professionally compiled, a final gift from people who had known they were about to die. Ship configurations, weapon capabilities, fleet movements, and, most crucially, the aliens' stated intention to eliminate human presence from space. The Admiralty had been debating humanity's response for 3 days. Some advocated for defensive measures, pulling back human expansion and fortifying the core systems. Others argued for diplomatic contact, believing that some kind of understanding could be reached. A few suggested that humanity should simply avoid the region where the hegemony operated, giving them a wide berth in the vast galaxy. Admiral Morrison had a different perspective. She had read every personal message in that quantum burst, every final word from the researchers who had died for the crime of being human. Dr. Chen's note to her sister about the fungi that could cure degenerative diseases. Engineer Vasquez's message to her children about the new propulsion theories she had been developing. Commander Rodriguez's tactical analysis, written with the professionalism of a soldier even as his world burned around him. They made a mistake, she said quietly, her words carrying across the silent war room. They should have killed everyone before they could send that message. Now we know exactly what we're dealing with. The United Earth Defense Force had been largely ceremonial for the past century, maintaining a small fleet for asteroid defense and search and rescue operations. Humanity had spread across the stars expecting to find either empty worlds or friendly civilizations. They had prepared for natural disasters, equipment failures, and the occasional terrorist incident, but not for extinction. That was about to change in the most dramatic way possible. Admiral Morrison activated the emergency protocols that would mobilize every military resource humanity possessed. Defense contractors received unlimited funding authorization. Research facilities began working around the clock on weapon technologies that had been theoretical just days before. Shipyards that had been building cargo haulers and research vessels were retooled for warship construction. But, most importantly, the Admiral activated Protocol 7, a contingency plan that had been developed decades earlier but never implemented. Every human who had ever served in any military capacity, from Earth's various armed forces to colonial security, received a recall notice. Veterans from conflicts that most people had forgotten found themselves back in uniform, their experience suddenly invaluable in ways they had never imagined. The message was clear and simple. Humanity was going to war, and this time it would not be humans fighting humans. This time, it would be humans fighting for the right to exist in a universe that had just become far more dangerous than anyone had realized. The 43 researchers of New Harmony had died to bring this warning home, and their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Admiral Morrison stared at the star chart showing the location of the hegemony fleet, 6 ships that had casually erased an entire human outpost because they considered humanity inferior. In 6 months, when the Earth Defense Force arrived at Kepler 442b, those alien commanders would discover what humans were truly capable of when their survival was at stake. The researchers had gone to the stars in peace, carrying humanity's hopes for knowledge and discovery. Now humanity would return to the stars in war, carrying something far more dangerous, the fury of a species that had just learned they were marked for extinction. The Earth Defense Force assembled in the Titan shipyards with a speed that surprised even its own commanders. What had taken decades to build during peacetime was now being accomplished in months through sheer determination and unlimited resources. Admiral Morrison walked through the massive construction bays, watching as humanity's first true warships took shape under the hands of workers who labored around the clock. The ships were unlike anything humanity had built before. Gone were the elegant curves and large observation windows of exploration vessels. These new warships were angular and aggressive, their hulls bristling with weapon systems reverse-engineered from the tactical data provided by New Harmony's final transmission. Human engineers had worked miracles, adapting alien weapon signatures into technologies that human industry could produce. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, named after her mother who had died trying to save the research station. At 35, she was young for a capital ship command, but her family's sacrifice and her own brilliant tactical mind had earned her the position. The ship was humanity's new flagship, a massive dreadnought that represented everything humans had learned about warfare in the past 6 months. The Retribution was accompanied by 47 other warships of various classes, from nimble destroyers to heavily armed cruisers. Each ship had been designed with one purpose: to demonstrate to the hegemony that humanity was not the helpless prey they had assumed. The fleet carried experimental weapons, advanced shielding, and, most importantly, the concentrated anger of an entire species. Dr. Marcus Webb, one of the few survivors rescued from a hegemony attack on a mining colony, served as the fleet's xenobiologist and intelligence specialist. His research on captured hegemony technology had revealed disturbing information about their enemy. The aliens were not simply aggressive expansionists but something far worse, a species that had elevated genocide to an art form. The hegemony had been systematically eliminating other intelligent species for over a millennium, believing that the universe belonged to them alone. They had destroyed over 200 civilizations, each one carefully catalogued and studied before extermination. Humanity was simply entry number 201 on their list, notable only for being slightly more advanced than most of their previous victims. What the hegemony had not accounted for was humanity's capacity for adaptation and overwhelming response. While most species they encountered were peaceful explorers or simple colonists, humans had a long history of warfare and conflict. They had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of violence, and now all that accumulated knowledge was being focused on a single enemy. The fleet departed Earth space on the anniversary of the New Harmony massacre, a date that was now observed as Remembrance Day throughout human territory. Admiral Morrison had chosen the timing deliberately, wanting the symbolic weight of the moment to remind everyone why they were making this journey. The 43 researchers would be avenged, and humanity would send a message that would echo throughout the galaxy. The journey to Kepler 442b took 3 months using humanity's fastest ships. During that time, the fleet conducted intensive training exercises and refined their tactics based on every scrap of intelligence they possessed about hegemony capabilities. The humans had one advantage their enemy did not expect: they learned from their mistakes and adapted quickly. Captain Vasquez spent her time studying the personal records from New Harmony, learning about each of the 43 people who had died in the attack. She memorized their names, their research interests, their families back home. These were not just casualties of war but individuals with hopes and dreams that had been cut short by alien malice. Each name became a weight on her conscience and fuel for her determination. The hegemony had left a monitoring station in the Kepler 442b system, a small automated facility designed to watch for any human return to the planet. Admiral Morrison smiled grimly when the fleet's sensors detected the alien presence. The monitoring station was exactly what they had hoped to find: evidence that the hegemony considered humans predictable and easily controlled. The attack on the monitoring station was swift and merciless. Human ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already locked onto their target. The alien facility managed to transmit a brief warning before it was reduced to expanding plasma, but that was exactly what Admiral Morrison wanted. Let the hegemony know that humans were coming. The fleet established a defensive perimeter around Kepler 442b and began the grim task of investigating the ruins of New Harmony. What they found there hardened their resolve beyond anything that mere intelligence reports could have accomplished. The research station had been thoroughly destroyed, but enough remained to show the systematic nature of the attack. Dr. Webb led the investigation team through the ruins, his scientific training warring with his emotional response to the devastation. The aliens had not simply destroyed the station but had taken time to eliminate every trace of human presence. Research data had been wiped, personal belongings incinerated, and even the atmospheric processors had been sabotaged to ensure the planet would become uninhabitable. But the hegemony had made one crucial mistake in their thoroughness. Hidden in the deepest levels of the research complex, they found Dr. Chen's secret laboratory where she had been studying the bioluminescent fungi. The lab had been sealed during the emergency and had survived the destruction above. Inside, they discovered not just samples of her research but detailed notes about a discovery that changed everything. Dr. Chen had found evidence that the crystalline formations on Kepler 442b were not natural geological features but the fossilized remains of a previous civilization. The planet had been inhabited by an advanced species that had been exterminated by the hegemony over 300 years earlier. Humanity was not the hegemony's first victim on this world, and the evidence suggested they would not be the last. The discovery transformed Admiral Morrison's mission from simple revenge to something far more significant. This was not just about avenging New Harmony but about stopping a force of evil that had been destroying civilizations for centuries. The hegemony represented an existential threat not just to humanity but to every intelligent species that might evolve in the future. The hegemony response fleet arrived 2 weeks later, exactly as Admiral Morrison had predicted. The aliens had dispatched a standard extermination force, 12 ships designed to eliminate any remaining human presence in the system. Their commander, Admiral Krelthax, had overseen 43 species extinctions and expected this to be no different from any other cleanup operation. The alien admiral was confident in his superiority. Humans had shown some unexpected resistance at their outpost, but that was simply the desperation of an inferior species facing inevitable destruction. The hegemony fleet was larger, more advanced, and had centuries of experience in extermination operations. This would be concluded quickly and efficiently. What Admiral Krelthax found waiting for him in the Kepler 442b system challenged every assumption the hegemony had made about humanity. Instead of a handful of desperate survivors, he faced a concentrated war fleet that had been specifically designed to kill his ships. The humans had not fled or tried to hide but had chosen to stand and fight with weapons that seemed impossible for such a primitive species to possess. Captain Vasquez watched from the bridge of the Retribution as the hegemony ships emerged from hyperspace. They were magnificent in their own terrible way, sleek predators that had stalked the galaxy for centuries without meeting meaningful resistance. Today that would change, and change permanently. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," the fleet commander's voice echoed across the communication channels. "Remember New Harmony. Remember the 43. Show these aliens what happens when they murder human beings." The battle began with a surprise that stunned the hegemony fleet. Human ships opened fire at extreme range with weapons that should not have been possible for a species barely 3 months into warship development. Particle beams and quantum torpedoes, technologies that had taken the hegemony centuries to develop, were being deployed by creatures they had dismissed as primitive savages. Admiral Krelthax quickly realized that his intelligence about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. These ships were not only equal to hegemony technology but, in some cases, superior. Worse, they were being commanded with a tactical sophistication that spoke of genuine military genius. The humans were not just copying alien technology but improving upon it. The first hegemony ship to fall was the destroyer Voidhunter, its shields collapsing under a concentrated barrage from 3 human cruisers. The alien vessel broke apart in a display of brilliant plasma, its crew of 200 dying in seconds. It was the first time in over 50 years that a hegemony warship had been destroyed in combat, and the psychological impact on the alien fleet was immediate. Captain Vasquez maneuvered the Retribution with deadly precision, using the massive dreadnought's firepower to devastating effect. The ship's primary weapon, a focused gravity projector reverse-engineered from hegemony designs, tore through alien shields like they were made of paper. Each successful hit was accompanied by a quiet "for New Harmony" from the bridge crew. The human fleet fought with a coordination that reflected months of intensive training and a shared purpose that the hegemony could not understand. These were not professional soldiers fighting for pay or glory, but citizens defending their species' right to exist. Every human ship was crewed by volunteers who had seen the recordings from New Harmony and understood what they were fighting against. Dr. Webb monitored the battle from the fleet's command ship, analyzing hegemony tactics and weapon performance in real time. His data would be transmitted back to Earth continuously, ensuring that even if this fleet was destroyed, humanity would learn from the engagement. The hegemony's greatest advantage had always been their secrecy, but that was ending today. Admiral Krelfax found himself in an impossible situation. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons that should not exist, deployed by a species that should have been extinct. The humans were not fighting like desperate survivors but like experienced predators who had turned the tables on their would-be exterminators. The hegemony commander attempted to withdraw his remaining ships, but the human fleet had positioned itself to prevent exactly that possibility. Admiral Morrison had studied the tactical data from New Harmony carefully, noting how the alien ships had maintained formation and retreat options. She had no intention of allowing any hegemony vessels to escape and report on human capabilities. One by one, the alien ships were hunted down and destroyed. The massive hegemony dreadnought Eternal Dominion, Admiral Krelfax's flagship, lasted the longest due to its superior shielding and armor. But even it could not withstand the concentrated firepower of the entire human fleet focused on a single target. In his final moments, Admiral Krelfax transmitted an emergency burst to Hegemony High Command, a brief message that would change the alien empire's understanding of the universe. Humans are not inferior, the transmission read. They are something else entirely. Recommend immediate strategic withdrawal from all human-adjacent sectors. The message would reach Hegemony Command too late to save the extermination fleet, but it would mark the beginning of the aliens' first strategic retreat in over 3 centuries. The species that had conquered 200 civilizations had just encountered one that could fight back with equal ferocity and superior determination. As the last hegemony ship exploded in a brilliant flash of contained stellar material, the human fleet found itself in complete control of the Kepler 442b system. They had achieved something that no other species in the past millennium had accomplished. They had defeated the hegemony in open combat and completely eliminated an extermination fleet. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the debris fields that marked the graves of 12 alien warships. The hegemony had come to this system to complete their genocide of humanity, but instead they had encountered their own extinction. The hunters had become the hunted, and the balance of power in this region of space had shifted permanently. Captain Vasquez issued orders for search and recovery operations, knowing that every piece of hegemony technology they could salvage would make humanity stronger for the battles to come. Because this victory, satisfying as it was, represented only the beginning of a much larger conflict. The hegemony would not simply accept this defeat and withdraw from human space. The real war was just beginning, but humanity had sent a clear message to their enemies. The species that had murdered the researchers of New Harmony had discovered that humans were not victims to be casually exterminated. They were predators in their own right, and they had just announced their presence to the galaxy in the most violent way possible. Dr. Webb began composing his report on the battle, knowing that his analysis would shape humanity's strategy for the war to come. The hegemony had revealed weaknesses in this engagement, tactical limitations that could be exploited in future encounters. Most importantly, they had shown that they could be defeated, their technology matched, their tactics countered. As the human fleet began its journey back to Earth space, they carried with them something more valuable than salvaged alien technology. They carried proof that humanity could stand against the darkness that had consumed so many other species. The 43 researchers of New Harmony had not died in vain, and their sacrifice had awakened something in humanity that would reshape the galaxy forever. The Hegemony High Council gathered in their ancient chamber on the core world of Nexus Prime, a meeting that had not been called for over 2 centuries. Supreme Commander Zarthon, oldest and most accomplished of the hegemony leadership, studied the tactical reports from the Kepler 442b engagement with growing disbelief. 12 ships destroyed, an entire extermination fleet eliminated, and not a single human casualty recorded. The chamber itself was a monument to hegemony dominance, its walls covered with the preserved artifacts of 200 extinct civilizations. Each species had contributed something unique to the display before their elimination: crystal matrices from the Villani, living metal sculptures from the Korath, temporal viewing devices from the long-dead architects. The humans would have been artifact number 201, but now that seemed increasingly unlikely. Commander Veltar, leader of the 5th Extermination Fleet, reviewed the transmitted data from Admiral Krelfax's final moments. The human ships had demonstrated technology that should have taken centuries to develop, weapons systems that matched or exceeded hegemony capabilities, and tactical coordination that suggested military sophistication far beyond what their initial assessment had indicated. They reverse-engineered our technology from a single engagement, Veltar reported, his voice carrying undertones of disbelief that resonated through the chamber. Not only that, they improved upon our designs and deployed them in coordinated fleet actions within months of first contact. This level of adaptation is unprecedented in our recorded history. Supreme Commander Zarthon had personally overseen the extinction of 47 species during his long career. He had watched civilizations fall to hegemony with predictable regularity, each following a pattern that had been refined over centuries of practice. First came shock at the existence of superior alien life, then desperate attempts at communication and diplomacy, followed by increasingly desperate defensive measures, and, finally, collapse into extinction. Humans had skipped the first 3 phases entirely and jumped directly to devastating counterattack. More disturbing, they had done so with an effectiveness that suggested this species possessed qualities that the hegemony had never encountered before. The tactical reports indicated that human crews had fought with a level of determination that bordered on the supernatural, accepting casualties without surrender and coordinating attacks with precision that matched their most experienced commanders. What is their current fleet strength? Zarthon inquired, though he suspected the answer would not bring comfort to the assembled council. Strategic analyst Nexoth activated the holographic display showing human space. Red markers indicated confirmed military installations, while yellow zones marked areas where human activity had increased dramatically since the New Harmony incident. The display painted a picture of a species mobilizing for total war with resources and speed that defied conventional understanding. Current estimates place their fleet strength at over 300 warships, with production accelerating beyond our predictive models, Nexoth reported. Their shipbuilding capacity has increased by a factor of 20 since the first engagement, suggesting they have converted their entire industrial base to military production. Most concerning, they appear to be constructing vessel classes that exceed our current specifications. The implications were staggering. In less than a year, humans had gone from having no military fleet to possessing a force that could threaten hegemony dominance in multiple sectors. Their shipyards were producing vessels at a rate that suggested unlimited resources and a population completely committed to warfare. This was not the behavior of a typical species facing extinction but of a civilization that had chosen to fight rather than submit. Commander Veltar studied the tactical analysis of human weapon systems with professional appreciation for their effectiveness. The particle beam array showed improvements over hegemony designs, quantum torpedo launchers that could penetrate standard shielding, and, most impressively, gravity manipulator weapons that could tear apart starships at the molecular level. These were not crude copies of alien technology but genuine innovations that in some cases surpassed the originals. But it was the psychological profile of human combat behavior that proved most disturbing to the hegemony leadership. Unlike other species that fought desperately for survival, humans appeared to be fighting for revenge, a concept that the hegemony found difficult to understand. Their entire military doctrine was based on the assumption that inferior species would submit to superior force once the futility of resistance became clear. Humans had demonstrated no inclination toward submission whatsoever. Instead, they had embraced warfare with an enthusiasm that suggested they actually preferred conflict to diplomacy. Intelligence reports indicated that human recruitment stations were overwhelmed with volunteers, that their population was actually celebrating the opportunity to fight an extinction war against a superior enemy. Such behavior was not merely unprecedented but completely irrational from the hegemony perspective. Dr. Sarah Chen's sister, Dr. Lisa Chen, now served as director of the Human Xenobiological Warfare Division, a department that had been created specifically to study hegemony physiology and develop targeted weapons. Her work was driven by personal grief and professional curiosity, a combination that had produced terrifying results in the laboratory beneath the lunar military complex. The first bioweapons designed specifically for hegemony physiology had been tested successfully, viral agents that could survive in the aliens' artificial atmosphere and attack their unique cellular structure. But, more importantly, Dr. Chen had discovered something about hegemony psychology that explained their historical success and pointed toward their potential downfall. The hegemony had evolved on a world where they were the ultimate predators, facing no significant threats or competition for millions of years. Their expansion into space had been driven by resource needs rather than survival pressure, and their extinction campaigns had always been conducted against species that could offer no meaningful resistance. They had never faced an enemy that could match their capabilities and had no psychological framework for processing such a threat. Admiral Morrison reviewed the intelligence reports from deep space reconnaissance missions with satisfaction. Human scout ships had been tracking hegemony fleet movements for months, mapping their territories and identifying strategic targets. The aliens had grown complacent over centuries of easy victories, their defensive installations minimal and their fleet deployments predictable. The next phase of humanity's war plan would exploit this complacency in ways the hegemony could not anticipate. Instead of waiting for the aliens to mount another extermination attempt, humanity would take the offensive and carry the war into hegemony space. The species that had murdered the researchers of New Harmony would discover that their victims could strike back across interstellar distances with devastating effect. The human war fleet had grown to over 400 ships, organized into 12 task forces each capable of independent operations across multiple star systems. These were not the exploratory vessels that had carried humanity to the stars but purpose-built weapons of war designed for a single mission, the complete destruction of the hegemony as a threat to galactic civilization. Captain Elena Vasquez now commanded the first strike force, 28 ships including the upgraded dreadnought Retribution. Her force had been assigned the most dangerous mission in human history, a direct assault on Nexus Prime, the hegemony capital world that had never been attacked by an alien force. The symbolic value of striking the enemy's heart would demonstrate to every species in the galaxy that the hegemony was not invincible. The assault fleet departed Earth space without ceremony, their mission classified beyond the highest levels of government. Even most military personnel did not know the true scope of the operation, understanding only that humanity was taking the war to the enemy in ways that would determine the future of both species. This was the moment when humans would discover whether their fury was sufficient to overcome an empire that had dominated this region of space for over 1,000 years. The journey to Nexus Prime required 6 months of travel through hyperspace, using routes that human reconnaissance had mapped from captured hegemony navigation data. The task force moved in complete silence, their ships running on minimal power signatures to avoid detection by the extensive sensor networks that protected the alien capital system. During the approach, the human crews studied every available piece of intelligence about their target. Nexus Prime was not merely a planet but an artificial construct the size of a small moon, surrounded by defensive installations that had protected the hegemony leadership for centuries. The orbital defenses alone outgunned most planetary fleets, while the planet itself was protected by energy shields that could withstand direct stellar bombardment. But the human attack plan did not rely on conventional weapons or frontal assault tactics. Dr. Chen's biological weapons would be deployed first, targeting the artificial atmosphere that sustained life throughout the hegemony capital complex. Quantum torpedoes equipped with gravity manipulation warheads would follow, designed to create gravitational anomalies that would tear apart the defensive installations from within. Most importantly, humanity's newest technological achievement would be deployed for the first time in combat: temporal displacement bombs that could age matter by thousands of years in seconds, turning the strongest armor into cosmic dust. The weapons were experimental and dangerous, but they represented humanity's commitment to victory regardless of the cost. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Retribution as the task force approached the outer edge of the Nexus Prime system. Through the viewscreen, she could see the artificial lights of the hegemony capital, a sprawling complex that housed the leadership of a genocidal empire. In hours, those lights would be extinguished forever, and the species that had murdered 43 human researchers would face justice delivered at the speed of light. All ships, prepare for assault, Admiral Morrison's voice carried across the fleet communication channels. Remember that this is not just revenge for New Harmony, but justice for 200 extinct civilizations. Today we end the hegemony's reign of terror forever. The attack began with simultaneous strikes against the outer defensive perimeter, human ships emerging from hyperspace already firing at predetermined targets. The element of surprise was complete, with hegemony forces having no warning until human weapons were already tearing through their shields. The aliens had grown so confident in their invincibility that the possibility of an attack on their capital had never been seriously considered. Within minutes, the outer defense grid was collapsing under the coordinated human assault. Orbital platforms that had protected Nexus Prime for centuries were reduced to expanding clouds of plasma as human weapons found their targets with devastating accuracy. The hegemony home fleet responded quickly, but they were facing an enemy that had studied their tactics for months and prepared counters for every possible response. The biological weapons deployed by Dr. Chen's division proved devastatingly effective against hegemony physiology. The artificial atmosphere that sustained the alien capital complex began breaking down at the molecular level, forcing massive evacuations and crippling the coordination of their defensive efforts. For the first time in their history, the hegemony leadership found themselves choking on the air of their own stronghold. As the human fleet pressed deeper into the Nexus Prime system, they encountered the full fury of an empire fighting for its survival. Hegemony reinforcements arrived through hyperspace in waves, their ships crewed by the most experienced commanders in the alien military. The battle became a titanic struggle between two civilizations, each fighting for the right to determine the future of their species. But the humans had advantages that the hegemony could not overcome through experience or superior numbers. They fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction combined with the fury of victims seeking justice. Every human crew member carried the memory of New Harmony and the knowledge that failure would mean the end of their civilization. Captain Vasquez guided the Retribution through the heart of the enemy fleet, her massive dreadnought absorbing incredible damage while dealing death to any hegemony ship that came within range. The ship's crew fought with precision born of months of intensive training and motivation that could not be quantified by any tactical analysis. They were not merely soldiers but the instruments of their species' righteous anger. The final assault on Nexus Prime itself began as the last of the orbital defenses fell to human firepower. Temporal displacement bombs detonated across the artificial world's surface, aging the ancient structures by millennia in moments and reducing the seat of hegemony power to cosmic dust. The civilization that had destroyed 200 others died in flames and temporal distortion, their empire crumbling as their capital vanished from existence. Supreme Commander Zarthon died in the collapse of the Hegemony High Council chamber, crushed beneath artifacts taken from extinct civilizations that had suddenly aged beyond the ability of matter to maintain cohesion. His final thought was one of incomprehension at how inferior creatures had managed to destroy an empire that had seemed destined to rule the galaxy forever. In the aftermath of the battle, human task forces spread throughout hegemony space, liberating worlds that had been enslaved for centuries and dismantling the infrastructure of genocide that the aliens had built. The message was transmitted to every corner of the galaxy: the age of hegemony dominance was over, and the species that had claimed genetic superiority lay extinct among the ruins of their capital world. Admiral Morrison stood in the ruins of the Hegemony High Council chamber, now exposed to the vacuum of space through the shattered dome that had once protected the alien leadership. Around her lay the artifacts of 200 extinct civilizations, silent witnesses to the Empire's crimes against the galaxy. Today, justice had finally been served, and the researchers of New Harmony could rest knowing their deaths had been avenged. The war was over, but the galaxy had been forever changed by humanity's response to genocide. Species that had hidden in fear of hegemony expansion now looked to Earth as a potential protector, while others wondered if humans might become the next threat to galactic peace. The answer to that question would determine the shape of civilization for centuries to come. Dr. Lisa Chen transmitted her final report on the biological weapons that had proven so effective against hegemony physiology, but she also included a recommendation that the weapons be destroyed rather than stockpiled. Humanity had proven it could defend itself against extinction, but it must not become the next species to threaten others with genocide. The lesson of New Harmony was not just about the need for strength but the importance of remaining human even in the face of unimaginable evil. As the human fleet departed the ruins of Nexus Prime, they carried with them the knowledge that their species had passed its greatest test. When faced with extinction, humanity had not despaired or submitted but had chosen to fight back with overwhelming force and unbreakable determination. The 43 researchers of New Harmony had been avenged, and their deaths had marked the beginning of humanity's emergence as a galactic power capable of protecting the innocent from those who would destroy them. The stars belonged to those strong enough to claim them, and humanity had just announced to the galaxy that they intended to be among those claimants for a very long time to come.